We exist to expose what power hides, to pull the curtain off, what governments, billionaires, and elites do not want you to see. This story is one of those buried truths, a case that refuses to die no matter how much time passes or how many officials call it closed. It is the story of Jeffrey Epstein, the man who knew too much, the man whose death inside a federal prison was called a suicide, but whose evidence points to something far darker. It is a story of lies, fear, and panic among the powerful, especially Donald Trump, as new images from Epstein's cell are now surfacing, tearing apart the official explanation and exposing the cracks of a cover-up that goes far beyond one man's death. The official record says Epstein took his own life inside the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan in August 2019. That is the version pushed by the Department of Justice, repeated by the press and quietly accepted by those in power. But 5 years later, evidence continues to appear showing inconsistencies, manipulation, and deliberate tampering with the crime scene. 90 photographs obtained by CBS reveal a scene that makes less sense the more you look at it. Socks in different positions, evidence markers missing, and items moving between photos. According to former law enforcement and digital forensic experts, this was not an investigation. It was a mess. One of them, Nick Barrero, called it evidence photography, 101 gone wrong. He said the basics were ignored. No wide shots, no consistent angles, no clear progression. That is not accident. That is intention. According to the report, Epstein's cell was not properly secured. He was supposedly taken off suicide watch after an earlier incident that raised serious concerns. Yet no follow-up was made. His cellmate, Efraini Reyes, was transferred the day before Epstein's death. Normally, in such cases, the inmate's photo is removed from the cell door to signal a transfer. But Reyes's picture remained. To anyone walking past, it looked like two people were still inside. That small oversight becomes enormous when you realize it could have been used to mask entry or movement inside the cell without triggering suspicion. Then there were the cameras. Inside a federal facility with supposedly full surveillance, the camera that faced Epstein's cell just happened to be malfunctioning. The Department of Justice later admitted that the hard drive failed and the footage was not recorded. The other camera in the hallway produced a blurry video file that was later found to be corrupted. No one has ever recovered those recordings. The official excuse was hardware failure. But those familiar with federal evidence handling know that such a double malfunction on the same night is almost impossible. At 6:30 a.m. on August 10, 2019, a corrections officer delivering breakfast found Epstein's body. The report says he was hanging from a bunk with a strip of bedsheet, his legs extended, his body nearly upright, his buttocks just an inch off the floor. Cold to the touch, no pulse, no breathing. But the FBI did not arrive until 1:30 p.m. 7 hours later. In that time, the body was moved, the cell was disturbed, and the chain of evidence was broken. The sheet allegedly used as a noose was never conclusively identified. In fact, multiple photos show different pieces of fabric, and none match the description given by investigators. Forensic experts later pointed out something shocking. The height of the bar where the orange fabric was tied was too low for a hanging to produce that kind of injury. If Epstein had used it, his body would have rested on the mattress. That makes the official story physically impossible. Other photos appear to have been taken in a completely different room, with objects placed to mimic evidence. The Department of Justice's own Inspector General later admitted that the noose shown in the released photos was not the ligature Epstein used. Then there are the eyewitness accounts, and they make even less sense. Inmates across the hall told investigators they saw a guard enter, try to revive Epstein, and carry out a rope and a defibrillator. They said Epstein had headphones in his ears at the time. That raises a question that no one can answer. How can someone hang themselves while wearing headphones? And how could guards remove a noose from a body without disturbing them? Those details are absurd, yet they were accepted in official reports. And then there's the paper. Construction paper taped over the cells across from Epstein's, blocking any view inside his area. The photos taken after his death show it clearly. The paper had been up during the night, meaning the inmates who were interviewed as eyewitnesses could not have seen anything. Yet their statements were used to support the official version. If they could not see, what were they really confirming? Epstein's brother, Mark, has been fighting since the beginning. He says his brother was murdered and that the government ignored critical evidence. He hired Dr. Michael Baden, a former New York City medical examiner, who reviewed the autopsy photos and found fractures in the hyoid bone and bruising on both sides of the neck. He said these were classic signs of strangulation, not hanging. But federal authorities dismissed his conclusions. They insisted it was a suicide. They closed the case. 5 years later, CBS's new investigation has reignited the fire. The leaked photos and reports show an investigation that broke every rule. The FBI delayed interviews for 2 years. Some witnesses were never questioned. Evidence bags were mislabeled, some left open. Fingerprints were missing from key surfaces. And perhaps most disturbingly, the Bureau of Prisons failed to preserve digital logs, leaving major gaps in the timeline. For a death inside a federal facility, involving a man accused of trafficking minors to the rich and powerful, this level of negligence is unheard of, unless it wasn't negligence at all, unless it was deliberate. Epstein's circle was global. He mingled with billionaires, politicians, and celebrities. He threw parties attended by the world's most powerful men. There were photos of him with Bill Clinton, with Prince Andrew, and yes, with Donald Trump. There were flight logs showing trips to his private island, Little St. James, a place his victims later called a nightmare. Epstein believed he was untouchable. His fortune and his blackmail material protected him. But when he was arrested again in 2019, something changed. For the first time, he was facing real time, and that meant he might talk. Trump has long tried to distance himself from Epstein, calling him a creep and claiming he hadn't spoken to him in years. But videos and quotes from the past contradict that. Trump once said Epstein liked beautiful women as much as I do, many of them on the younger side. He was filmed laughing and dancing with him at Mar-a-Lago. Their friendship was no secret. When Epstein was arrested, the case fell under Trump's Department of Justice. Attorney General Bill Barr personally took interest. That's the same Bill Barr whose father once hired Epstein decades earlier to teach at the Dalton School despite his lack of qualifications. The circle closes again. Barr's DOJ declared the death a suicide. The report was rushed, redacted, and ended with no criminal accountability. The 2 guards who were on duty that night admitted to falsifying records. They had fallen asleep and missed their rounds, then signed off as if they had done them. They were charged, then quietly released with plea deals. Case over. No trial, no questions. But the public was never convinced. Every detail that should have clarified the case only raised more doubts. Why was the surveillance system offline? Why was the cellmate removed the day before? Why was the camera data lost? Why were the witnesses' cells covered? Why was the evidence mishandled? Why was the noose missing? Every answer creates another question. The deeper you look, the more it seems this was never an accident or a failure. It was a cleanup. Epstein's death protected powerful names across politics, finance, and entertainment. His files contained names, emails, and photos of people who visited his properties. Some of those names were later confirmed by victims in lawsuits. If those files were ever made public, the political system would burn. It was easier to remove the source than face the exposure. And that is where Trump's panic comes in. Because despite his efforts to downplay the connection, his name appears repeatedly in Epstein's social circle. The resurfacing of these images threatens to bring that connection back into the spotlight. Reports from multiple outlets indicate that Epstein's lawyers were negotiating a possible plea deal in 2019, one that would have required him to cooperate. That meant naming names. Those names would have included people from both parties, billionaires, royalty, and yes, political allies of Trump. Just days before his death, Epstein told his attorneys he was optimistic. He was planning to fight. He had no reason to kill himself. 9 days earlier, he had hired a new lawyer to appeal his bail denial. The lawyer later told reporters that Epstein was motivated and determined. None of his behavior indicated suicidal thoughts. He was even meeting with his legal team daily, reviewing documents and preparing for trial. That makes the timing suspicious. It's not the behavior of a man ready to end his life. It's the behavior of someone who still believed he had a chance. And yet, that chance vanished overnight. By morning, he was gone. The 2 guards who should have been watching him were asleep. Their shift logs were falsified. The surveillance footage that might have shown what happened failed. The prison's record system was incomplete, and the key witness, the cellmate, was transferred out without explanation. Every single safeguard failed at the same time. That is not coincidence. Since then, key documents from the case have been sealed. The full list of Epstein's associates, the visitor logs, the phone records, and the private emails remain under federal restriction. Even congressional requests for transparency have been denied. The excuse is ongoing investigation. But what investigation continues 5 years later without public results? None. This is protection, not investigation. And Trump's reaction says everything. When asked about Epstein, he changes the subject. When reporters mention the new photos, he calls them fake news. But behind the scenes, sources say his team is worried because these images expose something deeper. They show that the official story cannot stand. They show that someone, somewhere, wanted Epstein silenced, and that the system made sure it happened. The panic is not just political. It is personal. If Epstein was silenced to protect others, who gave the order, who benefited, who ensured the cameras failed, the guards slept, and the evidence vanished? Trump's administration was in charge of that facility. That means the questions eventually circle back to him. Truth does not die with one man. It lingers in the photos, in the metadata, in the voices of those who keep asking questions. The cover-up is cracking, and every new leak widens the break. The images released by CBS are only the beginning. More data remains hidden. Whistleblowers inside the system say additional photos, logs, and communications exist. This is not just about Epstein's death. It is about what his death protected. It is about the web of influence, money, and fear that keeps the most powerful people in the world safe from consequences. Epstein's case is a mirror reflecting how deep the corruption goes. For the public, this story is not finished.